Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Good evening. Welcome to your Direct Connection. Coming up tonight, the fate of the state's last Confederate monument. But we begin tonight with the latest on the plight of millions of people displaced by the invasion of Ukraine. Joining us to answer your questions is Krish Vignarajah, the president and CEO of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Krish, thank you so much for joining us. From what you know, what is the scale of what's happening in and around Ukraine?
Yeah. So we're obviously in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, the largest mass migration since the Second World War in Europe. And the tragedy is, it is obviously bad, but it's going to get worse. And what I mean by that is what had been Vladimir Putin's initial strategy that was more of a scalpel approach. We've clearly seen in the last couple of days escalation, and that has become a sledgehammer, increased artillery strikes, not just indiscriminate attacks against civilians, but clearly intentional attacks. Shooting at a train that was trying to evacuate women and children who were fleeing the country. Right now, we have 2.8 million refugees that have left the country. There are estimates of 10 to 12 million who are in Ukraine who are sheltering in place. But obviously, as things get worse and without any viable safe corridors, there is a grave concern about how people can get out of the country, but also how humanitarian assistance can get in.
And the big cities apparently have been circled or close to being encircled. It's a siege. I mean, the idea of the intruder is to make everybody so desperate that they just surrender.
Right. And I think that this is where you're seeing it with Kyiv, Mariupol. It was clearly a strategy to really strangle these urban centers. It has been incredible to see President Zelensky rallying his soldiers, his civilians, to undertake a resistance. But there is an ongoing wherewithal and how much civilians can take. Gas lines have been attacked, and we're in the dead of the winter there. Food supplies are incredibly limited. Medical supplies, there's a lack of nurses. Obviously, last week we saw a maternal clinic that was bombed. And so that is the situation that is being, faced right now. It is wonderful to see the U.S. government invest in terms of the humanitarian assistance, the economic assistance, Ukraine needs, but it is really quite dire.
Your organization's based in Baltimore. What can you and other Western aid groups do?
Yeah, so in the last several years, we've resettled about a quarter of the Ukrainian refugees, really all across the country. But as you said, we are headquartered here in Maryland, specifically in Baltimore. And there are a number of things that people can do. So one of the things that's critical right now is for us to fortify the front lines. We know that European nations like Hungary, Poland, Moldova, are really kind of bearing the burden of receiving millions of refugees. But of course, that's going to continue. So making sure, as people have been doing, sending what they can to support the NGOs that are helping. I know that there are some communities that are literally sending medical supplies, to areas in need. I think that's very important. But it's also about what can the U.S. do? So we need to make sure that we raise our voices and we tell our political leaders that supporting Ukraine and democracy is critically important, but also that the U.S. play a direct role. We can make sure that we expedite those Ukrainians who have family here in the US. Some have visas that have been languishing for years. We need to make sure that those families get here to safety on America's shores, and then we can complete the refugee, the processing. But we also need to make sure we use the humanitarian parole system. This is how we were able to resettle 76,000 Afghan allies. This is the kind of assistance, this is the kind of support program by which we can actually get Ukrainians who are at risk here to America.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question about the refugee crisis, give us a call at the number on the screen, or you can send an email to livequestions@mpt.org. Of course, we have a big Ukrainian community within the state of Maryland. Are you hearing from people associated with that community?
Yes, we are. We are hearing from them. We're hearing from some of the 5,000 Ukrainian refugees that we've resettled in the last, several years. And what we're hearing are a couple things. Some of them are, of course, deeply concerned for family that is still in harm's way. We're receiving videos and accounts of what are clearly attacks intended to target civilians. We're hearing about how supplies are running low. A lot of the infrastructure no longer exists. It's been decimated. And then we're hearing that they want to reunify with family. They want to help their family if only we can get them here to Maryland. And that's where I think that President Biden and the White House have an opportunity. When we created the refugee resettlement system, it was in the crucible of the Cold War. This is the kind of program that we should be using to resettle Ukrainians in Maryland and elsewhere in the country. So I think we have an opportunity to play a global humanitarian leadership role here.
I've seen concerns that the media spend too much time, well, flip it around. The media spend too little time focused on refugee situations where the refugees are of different ethnic groups. We have a situation here where it's largely a Caucasian population that's being displaced. Your thoughts on that, to the extent you want to get into it, and also what other situations out there? We just had Afghanistan. What else should we be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, racism in any form, in any situation is despicable, and there is certainly no space for it in a humanitarian crisis where people are fleeing for their lives. There are, explanations that have been provided of border guards who were looking for documentation, and some may not have had that documentation, or lines where, those who have a Ukrainian passport would go into one line, and those who did not, of a different nationality, would go into another line. And so one line would be 2.5 hours. The other line would be 6 or 8 or 12 hours. So we understand in the first few days, there were some logistical concerns, but it was also clear that people who may have come from an African nation or an Asian nation, we knew that there were a number of students, for example, that were in these situations, that the Roma people, the people who are stateless, were clearly experiencing discrimination. Some were turned back, some were held in detention in inappropriate conditions. And so none of that, is appropriate. And we are hopeful that as we have raised these concerns with the UN, with the White House, that these practices have been ended, but we have to remain vigilant. In terms of what's on the horizon, the truth is that we will continue to see these crises, whether it's Ukraine or Afghanistan, or even at our southern border. Just last week, we saw a woman from Ukraine, a young mom who was traveling with her 3 children. And the sad reality was that she was rejected at the border twice before she was allowed in. And that was because Title 42, which is a Trump-era policy, was still in place. Obviously, we need to take precautions during the pandemic, but this so-called public health emergency, public health officials have said that there is no reason for it. And I think that this is where America needs to continue to be the welcoming nation, whether people are fleeing war zones or religious persecution or climate disasters. We know that we will need to continue to play a leadership role.
Well, let's dig a little more into what else the U.S. government could be doing here? Is it largely procedural? Is it possible to do an airlift of some sort?
Yeah, so I think I would break it down into three different categories of people who need help. So there are Ukrainians who are here in the US who fear being returned to a war zone. The administration did act in terms of announcing that they would receive temporary protected status, TPS. Unfortunately, it hasn't actually been implemented, and so that program is not open. It also applies to people who were here as of March 1st. So it is only retrospective. We need to make sure that those who are fleeing have access to the program right now. And that's where humanitarian parole comes in. Humanitarian parole is basically an authority that the administration, that the president can use to allow people who are fleeing humanitarian disasters to come into the country on a temporary basis. And for a number of the Ukrainians, they only want to be here for a temporary amount of time. They want to return to the only home they've ever known as soon as it becomes safe to do so. For quite a number of people who are leaving behind a husband or an older parent, they want to return. And so that is in part why we will see most of the displacement want to stay in theater, meaning in neighboring European nations. But obviously, when we're talking about approaching 3 million refugees, the US will have to play its part. And then the final piece is we have two systems by which people can permanently resettle here in the US. And candidly, both are dysfunctional. Refugee resettlement and the asylum system, both are backlogged. They take years in order to process applications. And of course, Ukrainians who are fleeing the country, or those of foreign nationalities who are fleeing the country, don't have that kind of time. And so this is where we need to invest and rebuild those systems.
I heard a radio ad today asking people to call a number and donate. And it frankly, it sounded a little fishy. And I mean, I don't know, it may have been fine, may have been legitimate. And it may have been they just put the ad together so quickly that it sounded like, low production value. But it makes me wonder, how can people who want to help know that they're contributing to a legitimate organization and that somehow, some way, some benefit is going to be delivered to the people in need?
Yeah. So we at LIRS get this question all the time, and so I really appreciate it, because it is critically important to do your due diligence, to make sure that the NGO just didn't start a week ago, and that they have a track record of providing services. It has been heartwarming to see how many people want to do good in this situation, but there are also people who want to take advantage of the situation. So Charity Navigator is a great resource. You can go to the website. They have a set of vetted NGOs that are working in Ukraine. There's obviously great international partners of LIRS who are working there, like Save the Children, UNHCR, the Ukrainian Red Cross. But obviously, there are also local nonprofits as well. And so we don't want to, ignore them. But I do think that going to a reliable source like Charity Navigator is valuable. But the final point I just want to make is, obviously, using your wallet is very valuable, but also use your voice. And that's why LIRS created an action center at our website, lirs.org, where you can let our political leaders know that there are ways in which we can open our arms here at home to these refugees who are fleeing Ukraine.
Phone call from Anne Arundel County. This is Maria. Maria, thank you for the call. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. Hello?
Yes, what's your question?
Yeah, my question, how can a refugee from the Ukraine came to America, for example, even my family? I have a family in the Ukraine, but I live in the United States, in the state of Maryland and Arundel County.
Very good. Maria, best of luck. And Krish, that gets to the question about the federal government accelerating some programs.
Right, that's exactly right. I mean, I think it is great that in principle, President Biden, Vice President Harris have said that they want America to do its part. We are seeing European nations doing that. Over the weekend, We heard the UK say that they were going to pay, British citizens £350 per month in order to help resettle Ukrainian refugees. Canada has said that it's going to accelerate family reunification. Those are some of the things that the U.S. can do. That's where we need to surge the resources to the State Department, to USCIS, to make sure that we have the staff, that we're using the technology, that we can expedite these applications. But we should also allow these people to travel to the U.S. as we are finalizing their process. And just the final thing I'll note is, a couple weeks ago, we actually had some Ukrainian refugees who had applied to go through the refugee resettlement, the Lautenberg system.
Krish, we're going to have to leave it there. Krish Vigdaraja of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Now, the last Confederate monument in the state of Maryland on public land is no more. The Talbot Boys statue was removed today from the courthouse lawn in Easton. We spoke a short time ago with Talbot County NAACP President Richard Potter and Ridgely Ox, a leadership member of the Move the Monument Coalition. Thank you both for joining us. Let me ask each of you to begin with Mr. Potter first for your thoughts on what you witnessed today.
Yeah, so today, what we witnessed was the removal of the Confederate monument on Talbot County Circuit Courthouse lawn. We finally sought to get that removed on today from our county council. And it was a good day. It was a great day towards equity and accountability and, creating a path for us to move forward.
Ms. Ox, your thoughts, and maybe tell us a little bit of the history of how this victory came to be.
Well, we're deeply gratified by what happened today. It was peaceful. It was respectful. This started with Richard back in 2015, or maybe even earlier than that. My involvement started after the murder of George Floyd. I think a lot of us wanted to do something real, something concrete to move towards greater equity in Talbot County. And this seemed like a no-brainer. It was hard work and it took a lot of people and a lot of time, but we did it. So,
some of the opponents of this, who we've talked to over the past few years, said that they didn't want to see history erased. How did you answer that along the way?
Richard, do you want to answer? I could. Well, it isn't erasing history. It's telling history the way it really was. This was a lost cause monument put up in the Jim Crow era. It did reflect the reality, and we had many Zoom educational groups on this, that many Union soldiers fought from Talbot County, many Black Union soldiers. They're not reflected on that monument. So it never reflected the real history. So.
Mr. Potter, on that, the arguments back and forth and why it took so many years and to have this wind up being the last standing Confederate monument on public land.
Yeah, so, I think that with where we are located in the state of Maryland, being rural America, sometimes it takes a little longer to get attention drawn to the issues, much quicker if we were on the Western Shore or in an urban area. So I think that took some time to get this issue out there so that folks, outside of Talbot County and outside of the Eastern Shore knew the struggles that we were having. Again, I also think that one of another factor was the fact that when we approached the council in 2016, it was viewed as a Black issue alone. And therefore, we're not going to do this because, again, it's a Black issue. And as Ridgely articulated, it wasn't until 2020, the murder of George Floyd, when people's lenses started to develop around police reform and accountability and the injustice there. And then I think they started to link symbolic messages to hate, and they started to make the connection. And then as the connection was made, they then went back to their local issues, and they saw fit where this monument now not need to have a place on our courthouse lawn. And we all came together and we worked for the removal of that to create a more inclusive and, as Dr. King would say, a beloved community.
Might it have been a different fight, a more difficult fight, if the statue had been located in the middle of a public cemetery as opposed to on the courthouse lawn, and it was literally like 10 feet away from the courthouse itself, which brought up issues of equal access to justice?
Absolutely. Again, having a Confederate monument sitting on a circuit courthouse lawn where African Americans have to go in and out to transact business, what is the message that that's sending to them? We all know what the Confederacy stood for. They were pro-slavery. They wanted people and individuals like me in slavery. So in going and having to do business in a courthouse, do I think I can get a fair trial with a Confederate monument on the courthouse lawn? So we wanted to bring equity back in that. We wanted to make sure that justice was reflecting equity, and we want that all around, especially within our courthouses and our government business. We want that to be an inclusive place for all members of Talbot County.
Your groups had to raise the money, actually, to make this happen.
Yes, we did. We raised more than $80,000 in not a very long period of time, and most of the donations were small, and most of the donations were local, just as most of the people that participated in the coalition were local. This was a grassroots effort, and people wanted it done. So
this statue is not being dumped in the middle of the bay as some had proposed. It's gone to a privately owned battlefield in Virginia. Is that okay with you?
That is definitely okay. Again, it sits better there than it does on the courthouse lawn. It puts it in context for people. The courthouse lawn, again, if you look back at our recommendations in 2016, it was to find a place that's more appropriate for that statue, not being on the courthouse lawn. So again, it's more appropriate there to be, amongst the other statues, so that the context of that can be told in its accuracy.
We wanted a place that was respectful and where it would be taken care of in perpetuity. And that's a place for it. So,
does it need to be replaced by something in Easton? Would a nice shrub do, or does it need? Do you want to have something with historical context and some other kind of monument, or is everybody ready to put this away for a little while?
So you're absolutely right. I think we have to get together to strategize, and I've been calling that the reconciliation process. To put something there and then we not discuss it after this issue has divided our county so deeply would be less of leaders. So I think we have an obligation to our community to come up with a way where we can bring folks of the different mindset and folks of the mindset to have this monument removed together to say, what is it that we can do to foster better relationships with one another for the betterment of our community, but in the same token, telling the story of the Civil War, specifically how it relates to Talbot County. And then, again, we've seen the harness of the power of the collection of individuals. So we can, in return, if we all get back on the same page, we can do the exact same thing that we saw today. But
let me ask you both, lessons you've learned from your successful activism on this subject.
Ridgely?
I was just going to say, it's a simple lesson for me personally, which is that if you have a just cause that everybody understands, they'll get behind it.
Might take a while.
It might take a while, but you'll get there because you're right. At the end of the day.
Richard, what do you take away from it?
Yeah, one of my takeaways is that, it's all in the messaging. I look at what we did in 2016 and how it was shut down, but then coming back, not giving up, strategizing, saying, okay, how do we put this message back out there to get more attraction to it? and then looking at the different pockets of individuals that we can connect to get them to be involved. Again, that's what it is for me, is being able to bring the diversified people together, allies together, and let us move forward collectively, because that is truly our beloved community.
Now, this has taken a lot of your time, a lot of your focus in the NAACP in Talbot County. Where do you put all that energy next?
I was just having a conversation with Ridgely and them about that today. And, this victory was symbolic in the sense that we are now empowered to do the work because we've seen the results of the work. Where we have to look at now is we have to look at our governmental policies and procedures. We have to take a look at the laws that are on the books in Talbot County to see whether or not these laws are equitable. If they're not equitable, then we need to come up with a resolution or an amendment that would make them equitable, so that, again, these laws and policies now speak to everybody equitably across our county.
Richard Potter, Ridgely Ox, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank us.
And coming up Friday on State Circle, is there a gas tax cut coming soon to a pump near you? We'll have the latest on that Friday evening at 7. And now for all of us at MPT, thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.